has woken up to the idea that great products and services solve real problems for people. That's good, but the understanding of those problems is often hopelessly myopic. There's an obsession with making us more efficient and more productive. That's a banal, one-size-fits-all understanding of other people. We are far more varied than that, with different purposes and different thinking styles. Our next speaker, Indi Young, is a founding partner of Adaptive Path, as well as the author of 2 books, the design classic Mental Models, as well as her more recent book, Practical Empathy. In her talk, Indi Young urges us to slow down and gather a richer and deeper and more multifarious understanding of other people. We need to spend more time understanding what the problem is that we are to solve than galloping towards solutions.
Hi everyone, I'm Indi Young and I'm excited to be here at From Business to Buttons. Super excited to be here with the community again. Our community is a really supportive one, and we've been around, I don't know, maybe a decade or 2 at the most, and it just keeps growing warmer and more friendly and more supportive. So I want to talk to you today about the idea of people, purpose, patterns, and problem space, and a little bit about how we are doing some work to shift away from the traditional business view of people. So what does that mean? Let's get started. So in the beginning, when we were writing software, basically to speed up calculations. We wanted to automate processes. We were trying to break codes in World War II. We were trying to launch rockets. We were calculating things as scientists, as mathematicians. We were even coming up with something like VisiCalc, which was the first spreadsheet. And suddenly, like, accountants got into the mix, and then we built things for procurement, and we built chess games, and all this sort of stuff. And in the beginning, what we were doing as software engineers was to take what the standard operating procedure in the real world, the analog world was, and to encode it, to put it into code that the computers could run faster. And in order to do that, what we had to do was understand how was it done in the real world? What was going on in the analog world? So what we did was we studied the process. And to study the process, I really meant talking to people about how they did the process, or reading books about how the process was done, or reports about how the process failed in certain different edge cases or scenarios where something unexpected came up. So we were studying the process, and then suddenly we realized that some people were having trouble with the code that we wrote. Wasn't working super well for them, so we decided to make it user-friendly and user-centered. And we were beginning at that point to study how well the process worked for users. How well did our encoding of the process work for users? So not only did it cover all parts of the process, but how well is it working for users? And after that, we started talking about how we really wanted, to understand the whole user experience, everything that the user was doing. And we invented methods like Agile and design thinking and jobs to be done to try to get a better understanding of how the human was in the world doing this process. And then the process expanded to include just about everything that humans do. I mean, we can order our groceries online. Thank God for that right now. At least those of us who are privileged. We can build 3D environments of potential buildings and walk clients through them. We can compose music. We can give loans to somebody around the globe who wants to have more corn on their farm. All of this, though, we continue to look through the solution the lens of what we are already doing for people. And about the same time, a couple decades ago, right? Right about when we were able to make software for lots and lots of people, the business models came along. All of a sudden, the big businesses were like, oh, hey, there's a lot of money to be made there. Let's go make some money. And along with big bushels of money came lots of shiny power. People with money are the powerful. They get to call the shots. They get to tell the labor what they're going to do and keep the labor from actually being treated or paid correctly. And not only that, they brought along this age-old idea of marketing to users. And in the case of Google, Apple, Facebook, and Amazon, yeah, they have products. But alongside those products, what they're doing is serving ads. And those users, those advertisers, that's the way they make their money. That's the key way they make their money. And so that's where a lot of their focus is. We may have things like smart speakers in our homes. And what are those smart speakers for? They're for collecting data on us in our homes. Yeah, maybe you can say a few words to it and do things without actually having to type something. Mostly it's data collection. So what's happening is that suddenly we find ourselves disintermediated from doing what we want to get done by having to go through some ads or see ads in the peripheral or watch some sort of a 6-second advertisement before we can skip ad, right? There's a really good TED Talk by Jaron Lanier where he says, oh my gosh, people, back in the beginning when we built the internet, we wanted it to be free for everybody. And we thought we were noble and we would make it free for everybody because everybody deserves this very powerful thing that we humans have created for ourselves. And oops, we used the model for making it free to people of broadcast television, which was advertising. And we should not have built that in. That's what he says in that talk. Very powerful talk. We should not have built advertising in. We should have paid it for it in a different way. Anyway, so here we are. We have this sort of situation going on. There's a lot of harm coming from this situation. And there's a lot of people being attracted to these very large, very powerful, very lucrative companies. They're being attracted because they make it very attractive. Wow. It would be fabulous to go work for, say, Google because you get, say, amazing food, or you get to live in all these different places, or you get supported in all these different ways. You get to work like one day a week on some sort of a side project, and it's very attractive to go work there for a software engineer or a designer or a product owner or any one of us. So this is our situation. Another thing that they're doing that other organizations has adopted is they've started measuring, oh, hey, you know, are our users delighted? We want them delighted so that they'll come and they'll come back. And are they engaged? How long are they looking at us through this glass panel? We want the engagement rates to go up so that we can tell our advertisers that we're going to, maybe charge a little bit more for those ads because we've got these people engaged. KPIs, those are even only based on the organization's goals. None of this is measuring what a person wants to get done. And I think it's high time that we do. So let's take a look, kind of unbury ourselves from the fire there. First thing, before you talk to anybody about making a shift like this, 2 prerequisites have to be embraced. That person needs to agree or see that, yeah, our software has done some harm. It contains systemic bias. It only welcomes a small percentage of people who maybe have exactly the same perspective and context as the people who have built it. And there are books and podcasts and documentaries out there. The Algorithmic Justice League just did the Coded Bias documentary about the ways in which we are harming people, the people we are sending to jail. The postmasters were sending to jail because of biased software. Anyway, so we also need people to recognize a second thing. The second prerequisite is that the average user, in air quotes here, is non-existent. There is no such thing as an average user. And to design to it is a ridiculous proposition. And yet, we find ourselves right there. In one more slide, I'll show you how we are. Right now, I just want to say, yes, there are plenty of us orgs and plenty of us working in orgs who are trying our damnedest to really support people and what people are trying to do. And I'm going to make us better because we're a really amazing community. So this slide I promised. Yes, even if you believe there's no such thing as an average user, we are still focused on 100-year-old market research, 100-year-old concepts of like this bell curve, and we're going to focus our business on the biggest part of that bell curve. That's like our average user, and they have this one way of being in the world, and we're going to support that one way of being in the world, and everybody else is just an edge case. Market research is defined by demographics. It's defined by roles. It's defined by job performers. It's defined, in short, by the solution being offered, not by the person. Moreover, this idea of having an edge case in your market, no human being on the planet is an edge case. All human beings on the planet are fully human. And to even creep toward thinking this way is how we start doing harm. So let's take a look underneath this. We have had centuries and centuries and centuries of systems. One of our systems in the beginning was the oral tradition, where we learned from each other, where we told each other about what happened to our crops, say, so that we can maybe do better next year. We worked together, we spoke together to build our knowledge together. And at some point, this knowledge started getting written down by some skilled craftspeople. And then at some point, that became type. We managed to start printing it. So that knowledge would be available and affordable to more than just the very, very elite. We made printing presses. Those presses could produce this knowledge and this information and put it out to more and more people, and we got more and more people literate. More and more people could read. Here in the United States, actually, our mail system and our newspaper was all predicated on the idea of getting knowledge to people so they could participate in a democracy. It was all very noble. However, one thing happened in the middle of that, which was the birth of the scientific method. The scientific method is recognizing how nature works, how the natural world works, understanding its truth. And somehow, idea of truth started getting wrapped up with written things, not oral things. And they all got curled up together with capitalism and how we run that kind of an economy, which also was curled up with imperialism and colonialism and paternalism and all of these other kinds of systems in our world. And so now we have what we have, but we don't question it because we don't realize that we're swimming in it, that it has this big, long history. Our orgs are still trying to solve for the typical user who has one way of being in the world, as defined by the systems that we, who are helping design this software and create these services that we are swimming in without realizing it. We're fish in water. That saying where the fish is all like, what water? Because, it's just where I am. It's just how I grew up. We're not accusing each other of causing the water. The water was caused. We are swimming in it. What we're doing is helping each other in this community become aware of the water that we're swimming in and become aware that we're in a certain community and there are other ways of being in the world that don't involve water or that maybe are anti-water. There are a lot of other economic systems in the world. There are a lot of other ways of being in the world, even within economic systems that aren't as privileged as where we get to stand. And we need to understand that and just help each other recognize it and help our stakeholders recognize it. Because our stakeholders, they are caught in the systemic waters of business, of civic, of government, of policy making, of all the history that's gone on behind that. So if we want to pay attention to humans and recognize that they're not edge cases, we want to say every single human has a different way of being in the world, but there are patterns, and the patterns we can speak to. Speaking of patterns, the pattern on this slide is all about human mind and human heart, inner thinking, guiding principles, and emotional reactions. That's what makes us human. So we can study humans instead of the process. And yeah, the stakeholders are like, that's sociology, that's psychology, that already exists, and that's not a part of business. It's really complicated. People change their minds all the time based on mood, or, they even go against their guiding principles. And I say, not so fast. If we frame it by a person's purpose, then we get data that has patterns. We can do qualitative data collection and find valid patterns. We don't have to rely on all these models that we make of this big data that Google, Apple, Facebook, and Amazon are collecting about us. Okay, so we shift our focus to people's purposes. What is purpose? A purpose is an aim, an intent, an objective. You could say a goal if you want, but goal has a lot of baggage attached to it. It's what a person wants to accomplish, and it doesn't matter what amount of time it takes. They could be working on something like a career that's going to take decades. They could be working on something like a family that takes their entire life. They could be working on something that takes just a few seconds, like deciding which shoes to buy. They could be planning something. You could be procrastinating about something and still be thinking about it. So this is what a purpose is. It's not a job. It's not a need. It's not an outcome. It's none of those process sort of oriented things. It's a person's purpose, something they want to make exist for them or for other people. And the way we study it is we ask them, what went through your mind the last time you were pursuing this purpose? And we let them take us on a journey. Let me give you another little example here. This is a person who has a purpose. The purpose looks like something to do with plants. So let's say this person's purpose is they want to create a vegetable garden so they can feed their family and their neighbors. And they're doing some inner thinking, that thought bubble. They're having emotional reactions as the bugs eat the plants that they didn't want the bugs to eat. That's the heart. And they're using their guiding principles to help make decisions about what they do with regard to the vegetable garden. That's the scales there. That's what guiding principles are represented there. And interestingly, a lot of people have different approaches to building a vegetable garden and cultivating it. You might be a sustainable and ecological type of person or environmentally environmentally conscious. You might not want to increase your carbon footprint, do the least amount there. Maybe you want to go larger scale. Maybe you want to produce for a much bigger neighborhood and make it as cost the least amount to you so that you can give as much to others, maybe cheaper prices, maybe even free. Or maybe you're super busy with work and your kids and you only have like an hour every weekend or every other weekend to work on it. So it's got to take care of itself. Or maybe you've got this idea, oh, hey, I'm only going to use the techniques that my ancestors used and just see if I can do it that way. Different thinking styles show up in patterns of data. So we've got different thinking styles of people pursuing a purpose, and we call that, in general, the problem space. What we're doing with regard to our own org, say if we're making some sort of digital tool, that's a part of the solution space. And there's a lot of other tools in that solution space. There's manual tools, there's mechanical tools. There are mental tools like, oh yeah, I remember last year when I planted this over here, those bugs got it. There's social tools like these bugs, how do I get rid of them? And you talk to people about the bugs, or you get on YouTube and you try to figure out how somebody else somewhere else got rid of the bugs. Or maybe you just put on the tunes while you're working and weeding. So there's all sorts of different tools that we use to achieve this purpose. Yet our org is only looking through the aperture of our own digital solution. Right now, everything we're doing is only through our own solution lens and not the whole person, the whole purpose that they're after. This isn't like, I want to study how he uses all the other tools. I don't care about tools. I don't even care about our own tool. I want to know what went through your mind as you were trying to achieve this purpose. And this is going to open up incredible depth for us to understand and build as new opportunities. New opportunities within the market that we're working in already, new opportunities in other markets as well that we didn't even realize. And it's all predicated on depth, inner thinking, emotional reactions, and guiding principles. That's how we see these three things are what build cognitive empathy. So how do you get this inner thinking? Yes, it is done through something called listening deeply. And it is done about how that person works toward their purpose. And this all has to do with that idea of orality that we saw in the Wayback Systems. Orality, people are saying, is sort of coming back through our social media, through our podcasts. We have more connections, person to person or person to group, where we can sort of make a deeper connection. So yeah, I want to define orality. Orality is basically a back and forth exchange. It might be more back than forth, but there is an exchange. And it's between two people. And it allows for querying into depth. That's the key bit. It can be spoken, it can be signed, it can be drawn, it can be written, like in social media. And it can take for whatever amount of time you want it to take. It can take an hour, it can take weeks, it can take years. You can add to it over and over across the span of a decade or two because we're examining someone's purpose, not someone's use of their tools. So this becomes an incredibly rich data store for our organization to then use to create new opportunities. So within your own organization, I'm going to suggest that you look for opportunities for orality. Here is a diagram that I've been creating with all of you over the years of all the different data collection techniques. Those are those gold bars in there. Those are different data collection techniques. I've tried to place them across like quantitative versus qualitative and versus evaluative kind of data collection, generative types of data collection, and opportunity types of data collection. And all of it, if we predicate it on a foundation of the people's purpose, if we frame it by a person's purpose, we're going to get patterns out of it. So user interviews, Those sound oral, don't they? So can we get our user interviews to maybe go a little deeper, to get into people's inner thinking as they were achieving a purpose? Can we frame our user interviews around a purpose? Card sorts. Maybe you're using a tool for a card sort that doesn't allow for a back and forth. Maybe you can turn it into a different kind of a tool where you do get back and forth, but you frame your card sort by a person's purpose and you ask them about their inner thinking as they were achieving their purpose. It's not just a lens through your solution, but an understanding of a person's inner landscape. This is also a very fun diagram to go through with your stakeholders to say, hey, listen, we're only using evaluative quantitative data collection techniques. There's more out there or something like that. I've seen people use it to great effect. So this rich data can gather over the years. You can gather an understanding of people's mental approach, which I call a mental model diagram, and I make a city skyline out of it. You can gather data about people's ability to use your tool to achieve what they were trying to accomplish. You can measure your gaps and weaknesses. You can also measure how strongly you support different thinking styles. There may be a thinking style that you, as, say, a startup, really needs to support so you can get off that runway and get successful and then turn to some other thinking styles. There's a lot that you can layer back on here. The usability tests, if you frame them by a purpose, that's one of these towers in here. You frame them by a tower, you can layer the results back on the tower, and product owners can then go, we have made progress. We are doing something better for this particular thinking style and this particular part of the purpose. And so that is the way forward. That's the way that we can use the depth of people's purpose to guide our organization's strategy, to check how well we are doing and measure our progress over time. So that's it. Thank you so much for some time today. There are lots more materials that I have out there. I also list books that you may be interested in reading, especially if you don't have both those prerequisites set within your organization. And I've got a Medium publication called Inclusive Software. I've got tons of recordings of talks that I've given, as well as courses and coaching and workshops on my website. Thank you so much, and I hope you have an excellent day.